Go find a wedding photograph from your family, your grandmother's, your great-grandmother's. If it's old enough, if it predates the mid-20th century, look at the dress, not the veil, not the flowers, the fabric, the color. If the photograph is black and white, you can't tell what color it was. You assumed white. Everyone assumes white. We've been taught to assume white the way we've been taught to assume everything about weddings, that they've always been what they are now. That the white dress is ancient, that it symbolizes purity, that brides have worn it since the earliest ages of civilization. None of this is true. Before 1840, there was no tradition of wearing white to a wedding. Not in Europe, not in America, not anywhere in the Western world. Brides wore whatever they had. They wore their best dress, whatever color it happened to be. They wore blue because blue was associated with the Virgin Mary. They wore red because red was the color of celebration and fertility across much of Europe and Asia. They wore green, they wore yellow, they wore gray, and more than anything else, across most of Northern Europe, across Scandinavia, across Germany, across the rural communities of Britain and France and Ireland, brides wore black, not as a symbol of mourning, not as a statement of grief, as a practical, sensible, deeply considered choice that reflected something about marriage, about womanhood, about the life a bride was actually walking into, that the modern white dress has spent nearly 2 centuries trying to erase. The deeper I went into why, the more I realized this wasn't a story about fashion. It was a story about what marriage used to mean, and about the single most successful act of historical fabrication in the history of clothing. Start with the black dress. Because the black dress tells you everything the white dress was designed to make you forget. In pre-industrial Europe, a wedding dress was not a costume worn once and preserved in tissue paper. It was a garment, a piece of clothing that the bride would wear again and again for the rest of her life. She would wear it to church. She would wear it to funerals. She would wear it to every formal occasion that her community required of her. A woman's wedding dress was, in most cases, the finest piece of clothing she would ever own, purchased, or made at significant expense, and it needed to last. It needed to survive years of wear. It needed to resist staining, fading, and the visible damage of a life spent working. White does none of these things. White stains at a touch. White fades in sunlight. White shows every mark, every splash, every trace of the labor that a married woman in the 18th or 19th century performed from dawn until dark. A white dress in a world before industrial laundering, before chemical bleaching, before the dry cleaning industry was an act of deliberate impracticality, a statement not of purity but of wealth. A declaration that the woman wearing it would never have to wash her own clothes, never have to kneel in dirt, never have to live the life that most women lived. White was not available to the women who worked. White was available to the women who watched. Black was the opposite. Black was durable. Black hid every stain. Black survived every washing. Black aged with dignity rather than deteriorating with use. A black wedding dress was not a concession to poverty. It was a recognition of reality. The bride was entering a life of work. The dress honored that life by being built for it. The color said, I am walking into something real, something lasting, something that will require everything I have, and this dress will walk with me. This raises a simple but critical question. When did practicality become something a bride needed to be rescued from? The answer has a date. February 10th, 1840. On that day, Queen Victoria of the United Kingdom married Prince Albert of Saxe-Coburg and Gotha in the Chapel Royal at St. James's Palace. She wore a white court dress made of heavy silk satin from Spitalfields, trimmed with a deep flounce of Honiton lace from Devon. She wore orange blossoms in her hair instead of a tiara. she wore a sapphire brooch given to her by Albert the day before, and the press went mad. Victoria's wedding was the most publicized royal event in British history up to that point. It was deliberately staged as a public spectacle, the young Queen's advisors understanding that a romanticized, widely shared wedding would improve the monarchy's reputation after decades of scandal and disconnection. Engravings of the bride were printed in newspapers and magazines across Europe and America. For the first time, a royal wedding dress was described in detail for a mass audience, and the detail that captured the public imagination above all others was the color: white. The Queen wore white. But here's the detail that nobody remembers. Victoria didn't choose white as a symbol of purity. She chose it because it was the best color to showcase the Honiton lace. The lace was the point. Victoria had specifically commissioned it to support the struggling English lace-making industry. The dress was an act of economic policy, not an act of symbolic virginity. The white satin was a backdrop for the lace. Nothing more. As if they were following instructions they didn't fully understand. Now here's where the fabrication begins, because what happened after the wedding is more important than the wedding itself. Less than a decade after Victoria's marriage, Godey's Ladies' Book, the most influential women's magazine in America, published a statement that would reshape the history of Western clothing. The magazine declared that custom has decided from the earliest ages that white is the most fitting hue for brides, whatever may be the material. It is an emblem of the purity and innocence of girlhood and the unsullied heart she now yields to the chosen one. From the earliest ages, go back and read that phrase again, from the earliest ages, as if white wedding dresses had existed since antiquity, as if brides throughout history had worn white, as if the tradition stretched back to the dawn of civilization. It was a lie, a complete, verifiable, easily disproven fabrication, published in a magazine with the authority of Scripture in Victorian parlors. Before 1840, white was not the standard color for brides. It was not common. It was not traditional. It was not ancient. It was a choice made by one queen for one wedding for reasons that had nothing to do with purity or innocence. And within a decade, a magazine had projected that choice backward across all of human history and declared it a timeless custom. The silence was deafening. Because the lie worked, it worked so completely, so thoroughly, so permanently that 2 centuries later, billions of women have no idea that the tradition is younger than the steam engine. The white wedding dress, the most iconic garment in Western culture, the dress that every girl is taught to dream about, the dress that launches a multi-billion-dollar industry, the dress that defines an entire ritual with its color before a single word is spoken, was invented in 1840, fictionalized as ancient within a decade, and adopted as universal truth within a generation. The pattern repeats with unsettling precision. Go look at actual wedding photographs from the decades after Victoria's wedding. What you'll find is that the transition was not instant. Wealthy brides adopted white quickly because they could afford a garment worn once. Middle-class brides followed gradually. Working-class brides continued wearing dark dresses, practical dresses, best dresses of every color, well into the late 19th century, and in many communities into the early 20th. Photographs from German, Scandinavian, and rural American weddings in the 1870s and 1880s show brides in black, not occasionally, commonly. The black wedding dress didn't disappear because brides rejected it. It disappeared because a manufactured tradition told them it was wrong. Now look at what the white dress actually communicated when it was first adopted. Not purity, wealth. A white dress in 1850 was a conspicuous display of economic status. It said, "I can afford a dress I will wear once. I can afford a dress that will be ruined by a single day's wear. I can afford to be impractical." The historian, Vicky Howard, has documented that in the 19th century, wearing a white wedding dress once was not yet the norm. Even Queen Victoria herself repurposed her wedding lace, wearing it to the christenings of her 9 children, to the weddings of her children, and to her diamond jubilee photograph. The idea that a white dress should be worn once and then preserved, the idea that is now the foundation of the bridal industry, didn't emerge until the 20th century. The white dress was born as a display of wealth. It was rebranded as a symbol of virtue. And then it was monetized as a single-use product. The evidence suggests something much larger than a fashion trend, because here's what the white dress replaced: not just a color, a philosophy. The black wedding dress said that marriage was work, that the bride was entering a partnership defined by labor, by endurance, by the practical demands of building and maintaining a household. The dress was built to survive that work. It honored the reality of what marriage actually was for most women throughout history, not a fairy tale, not a moment of romantic transcendence, but a lifelong economic and social arrangement that required strength, durability, and the willingness to get your hands dirty. The white dress said the opposite. The white dress said that the bride was pure, innocent, untouched, a vessel of virtue being transferred from her father's household to her husband's. The white dress didn't honor work, it denied it. It said that the woman wearing it existed, at least on that day, outside the world of labor and stain and reality. That she was, for one visible, photographable, publishable moment, above the life she was about to enter. I want to pause here and ask something that isn't usually asked. What does it do to a woman to be told that the most important garment she'll ever wear must be the color of nothing? Not the color of strength, not the color of durability, not the color of the earth she'll work, or the night she'll sit through, or the life she'll carry. The color of absence, the color of blankness, the color that shows every mark and carries no history. A color that can only survive by being protected from contact with the real world. A color that says, before anything else, this body has not been touched. The deeper I went, the more I realized that the white wedding dress was not a celebration of the bride. It was a rewriting of what a bride was supposed to be. The black dress said, "I am ready for what comes next." The white dress said, "I am clean for whoever takes me." The black dress honored the woman's future. The white dress advertised her past, or rather, the absence of a past, an absence that was assumed to be her most valuable quality. And then the bridal industry built a cathedral around that absence. By the mid-20th century, the white wedding had become the most commercially significant ritual in Western consumer culture. The average American wedding now costs over $30,000. The dress alone often costs thousands. It is worn for hours. It is photographed obsessively, and then it is preserved, sealed in acid-free tissue, zipped into a garment bag, and stored in a closet for decades, worn once and kept forever, a monument to a single day that the industry has spent 2 centuries telling women is the most important day of their lives. The official explanation collapses here. We're told the white dress is tradition. But the tradition is younger than photography. We're told it symbolizes purity, but it was chosen to display lace. We're told it has existed since the earliest ages, but that claim was fabricated by a magazine in 1849. We're told every bride wants one, but for most of history, every bride wanted something she could wear again. I don't have a complete theory. I have a question that multiplies the deeper I look. Why did a single queen's wardrobe choice get retroactively projected across all of human history by a magazine within a decade of the event? Why did a garment defined by its impracticality replace a garment defined by its durability? Why did a color that communicates absence and blankness replace a color that communicated strength and readiness? Why does the most expensive piece of clothing most women will ever own get worn for 6 hours and then sealed in a box? and the question underneath all the others. What did the black dress know about marriage that the white dress was designed to make you forget? I'll leave you with this. Somewhere in a photograph you've never seen, a woman you're descended from stood beside the person she was about to spend her life with. She wore a black dress, not because she couldn't afford white, because the dress she wore was built for the life she was entering. She wore it again the following Sunday. She wore it to her first child's christening. She wore it to her mother's funeral. She wore it until the fabric thinned and the seams gave, and the dress had lived as long and as hard as the woman inside it. Then a queen wore white. A magazine lied about history. An industry was born, and within a generation, every woman on earth was told that the dress her grandmother wore was wrong, that black was morbid, that color was improper, that the only acceptable garment for the most significant day of a woman's life was a white dress she would never wear again, sealed in plastic, stored in darkness, untouched and untouchable, just like the bride was supposed to be.